This is the city we call our own. These are the stories of the people we call our neighbors. This is the heartbeat of our hometown. Naperville, this is Real Talk. All right, welcome back to Naperville Real Talk. My name is Chris Grano. I'm your host, and this is a brand new season of Naperville Real Talk. Very excited. A brand new venue. We're inside the beautiful Naperville yellow box here. And again, this is the podcast all about people and places that make Naperville an incredible place to live. Not only are we one of the largest cities in Illinois, but we are a destination for all over Chicagoland, and people across the country are starting to understand the amazing reputation that Naperville has. So today I am so excited to bring you a guest that I've gotten to know over the past several months, become a friend, and just really an amazing thinker. So I know you're going to enjoy our conversation. My guest today is Dr. Maria Malayter. She has a PhD in leadership and organizational change. She is an author, and she is a health and wellness business coach. Dr. Maria, thanks so much for being here.
Oh my gosh, Chris, thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to be here and have this conversation.
Absolutely. So, health and wellness business coach. I think we hear those terms a lot, but in that sequence, how does it apply to you? Tell us a little more about what you do.
Sure. Health and wellness business coach, like a new name or way to say that I work with businesses, but then I also am focused on wellness. And so I'm coaching on two different ways. So one, I can coach businesses on a lot of topics because I've been in business psychology for a lot of years and behavioral science and just helping businesses. But then the other piece for health and wellness coach is really a focus on wellness, because a lot of people don't understand what wellness is. So I'm working with people individually as they want to make changes in their life. And it's not just about losing weight or going to work out. It's about this framework of 10 dimensions of wellness, where it could be your occupation, it could be your finances, it could be your environment, like where you live, and just helping them achieve their goals so they can thrive in life. So that's a big piece of it. And then I'm also working with a very special program called Positive Intelligence, which helps people in 6 weeks rewire their brain so they can come from a better place when they make decisions. So they're coming from a SAGE focus, where they're looking at their core values and they are calm when they're doing it. And they're also eliminating things that might sabotage their life. Like for me, I'm a hyperachiever and I love to achieve things, but how does that impact the rest of my life and thriving? So I could be really stressed out about that. But yeah, so that's health and wellness business coach, how to thrive.
There's so much that I want to hit on there, and I want to dive more into the personal aspect of that in a little bit, and maybe start out with the business. But tell me, just how did you find yourself in this career? What was the path of events that took you where you are today?
So it all began in high school, and I was in junior achievement. And they had this after-school business program where we met at the AT&T site, and people there mentored us on how to launch businesses. Like we would start and consolidate a business in a semester. So that's kind of the business piece. But then the other part is they would give us these professional development classes as high schoolers, and they would give us these books on how to be successful. So this one book is called I Dare You, and it was written by William Danforth, the founder of Purina. And he said, here is how you be successful. And he tells his story of when he was younger and in school, he was sick all the time. And a teacher dared him to be well. Yeah, she dared him. And he's like, I'm doing it. And he was well. And so from that, he came up with the first framework I've ever seen for wellness and success. And it was 4 dimensions, and it was physical, intellectual, social, and spiritual. And that's how you live a good life.
So that's what kind of, from a young age, seeded in your mind, like these different dimensions, and obviously you've developed that over time.
Yes.
So what was kind of your first foray into this as a career?
So the first foray into it as a career is 2 levels. Is one, my national sorority also has a wellness framework. And so immediately when I graduated from college, I served and I worked as a leadership coach,
Okay.
or a leadership consultant. So I traveled around the country and I was helping women thrive, college women thrive at their different campuses. So that was one piece of it. And then, and I still volunteer all the time with them now. Like, that's quite a few years since college. But then the other piece is I had the opportunity to land a position on a contract with the U.S. Navy. And so that's when I really dove into wellness. And I was a facilitator and then later a director of a 5-day health and wellness course that walks a person through their values and their decision making about wellness and health, and to increase personal productivity and thriving. And so those were the two elements that have kind of stuck with me throughout my whole career.
So you've worked with a lot of leaders in different areas. What are some of the struggles that leaders have with wellness that maybe is unique to them versus the average person?
So if they're a really good leader, they're serving others. And so the focus is so much about serving others. And so then they forget to take care of themselves.
Yeah.
So then it's kind of trying to create a good environment for the people they're leading, and give them good opportunities, but then sometimes they forget about themselves.
Yeah.
So that's a big piece of it.
That makes sense. And you can see that in everyday life. I mean, I think that happens to parents.
Yes.
Right? Parents
yes.
are leaders of their house, of their
Yes.
kids, and sometimes it can be at the detriment of their own health, right?
Yes,
Yeah.
yes. I was just going to say, and I also believe everybody has self-leadership. And so everybody is a leader in their life too. That's another perspective.
That kind of leads me to the next question then. So in your opinion, with the right tools, the right mindset, does everyone have the ability to lead, or is that like a born-in trait that only some have?
Oh, I think everybody has the ability to lead. So, and I think that there'll be times when, so I've been a college professor in my career too, and there'll be times that I'll have them write a paper about leadership and they'll say, oh, I'm not a leader. And then they'll tell me that they put together this 5-state family reunion, and I'm thinking, don't you think that's a little bit of leadership? Mm-hmm. And so I think the problem is yes, well, not the problem. The problem is the whole definition of leadership. And so, yes, everybody can be a leader and they can develop to be a leader. You don't always have to be an extrovert. You can be a successful introvert leader. So every day you're really leading others in how you behave.
It's interesting. I mean, I've thought about it in my own career. There's opportunities for leadership, and I think I've resisted it at times. Sometimes it's a little easier, right, to just lead yourself.
Yes.
But I've found that you don't grow as much when you don't have the responsibility of leadership in some way, right? Mm-hmm. Like, I mean, I've grown so much as a dad,
Yes.
leading, kids, and in our marriage, we both take leadership roles in different areas of our marriage, but then now, in career, and so I think it's easy to get a little comfortable. Mm-hmm. Would you agree? If you're just if you're not taking on the next challenge of really developing someone else.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. And it's really, our society is moving so fast that we have to constantly be in a state of change or an awareness to change. And it's always good to share what's going on if the person's willing to listen, right?
Well, right. It takes it's a two-way street.
It's a two-way street, so it could be just in simple conversations, but I think it's important to give, because I think of leading as giving too.
Oh, totally agree. I totally agree. I love that you said earlier that leadership is service, right? I think historically people have known that, but we forget that a lot. I mean, and our culture doesn't teach us that, right? Our culture teaches that leadership is about power or fame, right, or success. Have you, in working with different organizations or even individuals, do you sometimes have to help them rewire to think of it as an act of service rather than like an act of prestige?
Yes. So there's this theory, and it's an action theory. It's called leadership as practice.
Okay.
And it's kind of helping people understand that leadership is a practice. So we have been wired from old theories of the great man theory that the leader is all power and prestigious and all that. But really, where you're getting the most successful organizations are using collective leadership. And leadership is practice. And that's where there's some humility to say, what do you think? Instead of I'm always right. And so working with organizations, it's a little bit about that shift. Like what happens if you ask people what they think of instead of you making all the decisions? Because usually you're going to get a better decision that way.
Right.
So, but it's scary to let go of that, power that I'm in charge. And so there's some work to be done there. And I think where it's coming out more is because we're in these virtual environments and people have to think on their feet more because they can't just walk down the hallway and say, hey, what do you think? There's more of an effort. So there's a lot more collective leadership instead of just the power. It's kind of messing up some organizations.
Oh, I imagine that's an incredible change. But I love what you said about how, asking for opinions, not only do you get better answers, but I think even if the answers aren't the outcome, I think the outcome of that can be more buy-in.
Oh,
and
yeah.
more trust.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. It's so much about the trust. It's just, oh my gosh, my opinion is valued. And I think what we're seeing now is so many people want to feel like they belong in organizations. And so by being open and saying, here's how the meeting goes, and here's like maybe a free speak section of what do you think about this change that's coming, and what are your ideas? It gets more buy-in, and then people are more committed to it because they're a part of the process and they feel like they belong, which is huge.
And it feels like, I would imagine in doing this over the course of your career, there have been big shifts in corporate America, in the culture of that world where it used to be kind of people just showed up, right, punched a clock, did their duty, went home. And now, maybe because organizations are asking them to be plugged in more, available more, they not only want to go somewhere where they can get a paycheck, but they want to go somewhere, like you said, where they feel like they belong. They feel like they make a difference. Can you talk about what that shift has looked like over the last 10, 15, 20 years?
Yes. So it is, they always say that people leave organizations because of their boss, and it's also if you have a friend at work. Those are reasons, like you want to stay, is you have a good boss and you have a friend. But there is, even though I love the topic of wellness, I will not tell you that you're always going to be balanced and you're always going to have work-life balance. You're going to have work-life integration. And because you have the integration piece, and we've seen this from when we moved through the pandemic, is you're going to have the dog that Zoom bombs or something if they're doing a Zoom meeting, and that's the integration of it. So then that's created in organizations is maybe there's flexible start times because people are acknowledging, well, wow, you have a family and you're going to do much better if you're taking care of your family and then being able to do a good job. And so what you're seeing is a bigger part of the whole person instead of just the number clocking in. So that's something that it does tailor into the wellness aspect because people have changed their values about work. And they're not going to stay at a place that they don't belong and they don't feel respected for who they are, whatever their life looks like, whether it's family or they're really high on volunteerism or they're going back to school. So it's all those kind of shifts that work didn't look at before.
Yeah.
And now they have to because people won't stay. Right. And then even in some of the generations, they're really clear about boundaries. I'm not working the 80-hour week. So, and it's a whole shift. Even the way people dress at work is different, and that's fascinating, a total shift than the rigidity that we used to have. There has to be more flexibility if you're going to retain people.
Do you feel that because maybe the corporate culture of the past was so much work the 80-hour week, grind, do you feel like maybe the bounce back in some ways has also been extreme? The reason I ask is I have so many conversations with people often in their 20s, Gen Z, who there's this dream of like, I'm gonna work and I'm gonna, they used to call it, I don't know, there's some name for the culture, like fire culture, something like that. But it was like they wanted to work and then retire early, retire at 40.
Oh, yes.
Right?
Yes,
I talk
yes.
to people in my world in real estate that'll say, I'm going to build my real estate business, my team, and then I'm going to sell it and I'm going to go retire. And I'm an older millennial, right? And I've always thought to myself, that's so odd. Like, I like working. You know what I mean?
This is my favorite topic.
Well, let's talk about it.
Well, so yes. Okay, so there is that fire, and I think there's an achievement piece of I've gained this money to have this independence to choose what I want to do. However, if you look at some of my doctoral research, my doctoral research was on the transition into retirement. And the reason I did it is because people retired early and they were showing up all over my life, going back to school and wanting a part-time job and everything. So people are working well into their 80s. And so the whole term retirement is kind of strange in itself because that's transition too. So I think people are just trying to reset and figure out what they want value-wise, because the work aspect is really a part of wellness, is that you have intellectual stimulation. And so when I did my study on retirement, it was the 3 top things that people were considering were really intellectual stimulation, their purpose and their spiritual piece, and then also their social relationships. So, and that's what's challenging, is because you get some of that from work.
Right. Oh, for sure.
You do. And it's and people, they're thinking they're going to just do all this relaxing and they're going to get bored.
Sit on a beach for 40 years or 50 years.
Well, yeah, and that's the thing. That's the thing, is that, like, we have to have a different conversation about, like, living today. So it's great because you have all these independent people, like, we got all the money and we have choice. But what are you going to do now?
Yeah.
So.
Well, I think part of it too is, right, like, first of all, people are living longer.
Yes.
A lot longer, right?
Yes,
so
in
it
the
used
90s.
to be, yeah, I mean, it used to be, and we were much more of a physical labor culture when we were a heavily manufacturing culture, or obviously farming. And so people worked really hard physical jobs for 40 or 50 years.
Right.
And then their bodies were ready, at 65 or whatever,
Yes.
to retire, right?
Yes.
People are living longer now. We're working less physical jobs. Obviously,
Correct.
some people still do. But so I just hear this idea of, like, of an office worker hanging up their boots at 60 years old when they're going to live to 90, maybe 100.
Yes.
I'm like, how much golf can you play before you get bored?
Well, right.
Yeah.
Right. And so that was when I interviewed people, because I did a qualitative study on that, and that's where they were at. Like, I don't know my identity, I don't know my purpose, so what can I do? And so they had to work some things out. So, and that's how I found them in the first place, is I was offering part-time positions to do facilitation. So then what they're creating, and maybe this is what people are wanting to do with this fire, is what they want to do is create what's called a portfolio career, where you get the mix of everything you want in life. And so you're working, and then maybe you're volunteering, and then your recreation and your family. And so it's more of a portfolio career instead of like the whole shift of you work 9 to 5 and you work for X amount of years. I think that's disrupted.
Yeah.
Because you can do so much digitally today. There's so many different ways to work now. And I think that's part of the disruption. But I agree with you. It's so much about how you really know your values and your strengths, and how do you want to use that, or how you want to serve people with that.
I like that term, portfolio career. I've also heard you use and others use the term encore career.
Oh,
right?
yes.
And so it's like when you've gotten yourself to a position of mostly financial independence, or maybe you still need some income, right? But that it frees you up to be able to do those, like, passion projects, right? And so
Right.
Talk to me about some of the people that you've talked to or what they're doing. What does that look like for them? Is their joy and happiness just like on another level? from what it once was?
We just celebrated someone that I really looked up to. They had a celebration of life recently, and she had a phenomenal portfolio and encore type career. So she was corporate, and then when she got out of corporate, she went on and trained to be a yoga instructor. And then she also went on and did a lot of the healing energy stuff, such as Reiki, and she trained all these different people. But then she went back to school and got a doctorate. And so her whole thing was, I would like to spread peace now. And so that was kind of her passion. And it was really unique. And it was interesting to see all the different people's lives that she impacted. There's other people that have taken their corporate experience and then applied it to nonprofits. And so then, they're not in charge like the CEO, but they're coming in, doing the books. There's a ton of people that go on to be SCORE mentors, which is the Service Corps of Retired Executives. And so then they go ahead and they volunteer and help small businesses. And so they hold webinars, and they also have a mentoring function. And I certainly have loved my SCORE mentors. So they, that's a great thing that they've done too. Other people worked on their family, and they said, okay, this is a new shift for the family. I've always been so dedicated to my job. How do I fix this? And then they had best friends and their sons or daughters, and it's really kind of cool to see how that evolves too.
We were talking about, it was actually a sermon series at church talking about this and talking about mentoring the next generation, right? And I know I'm not an old man, but as I get older, that becomes more appealing. The idea of passing on some wisdom. I think what's interesting to me is there's this idea of work. To me, it's always made sense that the most time you have in your life to work and to really understand what drives you is your 20s, right? Or maybe the early 30s. And that's typically when, if you're going to have a family, that's typically when you're not maybe as tied up with family obligations. And then, so you can really drive, right? And then when you have that time later on in life again, right? You go through that season of really busyness and career and family. And then you have that time to pass on. But what I see is, I wonder if some of the young folks who are spending that 20s and 30s to experience things, right? Which is, I think the traditional sort of look is, maybe I'll experience things when I'm a little older and I have time. I wonder if then they won't have that same opportunity later on to mentor them, because maybe they haven't. I don't know, that maybe that's far-fetched, but it just feels like the order of drive hard as you're young and taper off a little bit more as we get older, and then give. It feels like a good rhythm to me, like a good rhythm to life. I mean, I don't know if you've seen that, and when you're working with these people who are going into their retirement, so to speak. Or
so, are you talking about the mentoring and the give back mostly, or the disruption of how things are getting experienced? It could be both.
Yeah, it could be both. I mean, I think I'm wondering, because this is such a new phenomenon with this disruption of career, right? And I'm not saying there's not good things about it.
Right.
I'm sure you see both.
Right.
I'm just curious if it's going to lead to less mentoring down the line.
So I'm going to talk about across the generations.
Yeah.
I think what's challenging right now is you do have a lot of young people that are remote workers. So then they don't naturally have mentors.
Yeah.
So that's challenging. And I think that that's an opportunity for people to kind of figure out how they can connect to mentor. I think that's a big piece of it, because they don't know that maybe they need mentors. And so it's more, hopefully, my hope is that there'll be more of an informal way to get people to mentor, because not all organizations have a formal structured mentoring program, but it's just to get people connected and related, which I think is something that we need more of, because we can't always stay connected in technology. We have to have beyond technology. So they may not know they need a mentor, I mean, I guess and that's part of it. And some of the business books talk about how you should have a personal board of directors. Yeah. Now, I don't know if that's a generational thing, but I know that that's something that I try to tell people is that you should have a personal board of directors around your life and career. Yeah. You know, that, and, you know, trying to get to that, just, I guess for me, some of that naturally happened because I was involved in different organizations outside of my work. So that's, you know, a little different than just in the workplace. So maybe that's the encouragement, is community. Like, how can you relate to people and build these relationships? Because what we're finding, you know, and like even the Surgeon General said that we're in a series of an epidemic of loneliness. So we've got to figure that out. So part of that is challenging people to get involved in community somehow so they can get those mentors.
I couldn't agree more. And it's interesting too, because I think some of that, even with parenting, they'll say more is caught than taught. And when you're not around people, physically around people,
right,
you can't learn those little things like, oh, I'm watching how she's interacting. You know, she's my leader, and I watch how she interacts with her team, and I like that, and so I want to emulate that.
Right.
When all you're seeing is, you know, Zoom calls or maybe going into the office once a month, or it's probably really hard to build that community and then learn the positive things. Yeah.
So that's where I think it's a little different is, as one kind of student explained to me, is they only talk to their boss once a month.
Yeah.
And so it's just, how do you kind of intentionally create communities so you're learning those skills from different people that are leading, you know, and building those relationships that you need to be thriving in life.
Yeah. All right, so let's use that to transition to talk to me about the 6-week program and touch on the 10 dimensions of wellness. We're kind of rounding it out. We talked a little about organizational change, and let's bring it back to kind of the individual battle for health and wellness.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, and it's so funny because the 10 dimensions is newer to me. I was usually attached to 6.
Okay.
So it's physical, intellectual, social, spiritual, emotional, occupational, nutritional, environmental, protectoral, and finance. Got them all.
That's a lot. Good job.
So that's a lot. I mean, that's a lot, because when you're really looking at someone and they're stressed out, you want to kind of check in those 10 areas, because there's going to be something that's a disruption there. That's the big part, is most people don't know what wellness is.
Yeah.
Because they immediately lump wellness with health.
Sure.
And those two, they go together, and there's components of health in it, but it really, how you live a really thriving life is taking a look at that and doing an assessment for yourself on the 10 dimensions and where are you. You're never going to be balanced out, and you're going to have things that you like more than others. But if you're looking for your stress points, you're going to want to look in those 10 dimensions. So that's like one piece. So then I help people coaching through that, like when they want to make a change, or when they want to say, I'd like to thrive more in my life. How can I do this? And looking at it through that framework. So that's one way that I help people work with that. And it's amazing, because people are doing good things, and they're saying, maybe I'm not well, but then, you know, it's even helping them be more aware of how well they are. So we're always such an achieving culture, and we're always doing, and there's something wrong and we should do more. And sometimes we just need to be in wellness, just be.
That's maybe some of the stress, like you said, an achieving culture. That resonates with me. It's the stress of, am I okay?
Yes,
right?
Yes.
Like, because there'll be times that I'm like, life's going pretty good, right? Like, I have great relationships. Work is fulfilling. I'm succeeding there. I feel, I'm doing things for my physical health. But there's so many angles to cover that sometimes you're like, it's just this low-lying stress of like, Am I doing okay?
Yeah, well, right. I mean, and that's the whole thing, but I think that's driven by the culture.
Yeah.
It's driven by the culture, because if you were to go to another country, the pressures are different.
Yeah.
The pressures are different of what people value. And it does go with your values, and I guess the best thing is to kind of take a look at, ask yourself, what are your values? And And are you matching it instead of doing all that comparison?
Yeah. Yeah.
So that's one way that I work with people. And then I could talk about positive intelligence.
Talk to me about positive intelligence.
Okay,
Absolutely.
so there's this New York Times best-selling book on positive intelligence. And so Shirzad Chamine is a Stanford lecturer, and he said, he did all these studies while he was at Stanford about how do people thrive. And you know what he found out is he found out that, gosh, we're our worst enemy. And it's how we think about ourselves and how we talk to ourselves. And basically, we're so busy judging ourselves, that's what's holding us back. So he put together this framework and habit formation, I guess, program that helps you undo that. So you first get an awareness of how you're judging yourself, and they call them your saboteurs. So first, everybody has a judge, but then you have saboteurs, and I already mentioned I'm a high achiever. So because of that, how does that disrupt the rest of my life? And then when I'm in situations that are stressful, I may be responding from, I'm a high achiever, get out of my way. I could be, and I'm very good. I could get an Academy Award in that for I'm high achieving, get out of my way, right. Don't talk to me, whatever. Yeah. But what I learned in this program and how I'm helping people with this program is how do you unwind that? How do you have the daily habits to get self-command of your brain is what it's called. And so it's how do you stop those thoughts? And how do you get into what they call SAGE, where you're choosing from your values and you're calm about it and you're making the best difference for yourself and others. So it's a 6-week program, and it helps you learn about your saboteurs, but then it also teaches you habits, daily habits that you practice every day to become more aware of when you get interrupted by the judge. And so 6 weeks, daily habits, a 1-hour video every week. And then I come in and I check in with you once a week and say, how's that going? Or what else, what are you finding? What are you discovering? And just seeing how can I help you?
We're getting drowned out here by the rain.
Yeah, I know. The rain is the rain.
But no, I
even responding to the rain. What the heck?
I know. No, but what I love about that is, and I'm in all disclosure, and I don't know when this episode is going to drop, but I'll be going through that.
Yes.
With you. I'm excited about that because I think, you tell me if I'm wrong, but when I hear you talk about it, a lot of it seems like it helps build self-awareness.
Yes.
Right? Because I think, again, you're the expert, not me, but when I see friends or family in a season of struggle, it feels like there's a little bit of chaos going on. And it's almost like we're kind of being led by the chaos.
Yes.
Responding to this happened here and this happened here. And I feel though at times with family, with business, whatever. And the times that I feel most at peace is when I am taking stock of the situation and I'm going, okay, there are things coming.
Yes.
But here's how I handle this thing. Here's how I handle this thing. And maybe it means you're in a season of I can't handle this thing.
Yes.
I have to just address this is the most important.
Right. Because, I hate to give the bad news, but some people are addicted to chaos.
Yeah.
And I know I've been there myself. I'm liking, let me create the drama. Yeah. But yes, this is totally what this is about, is getting to the self-awareness. So when those disruptions come, you're kind of like, what do I do today, this week? I got the blue screen of death on my computer, okay? So, where do you go with that? Yeah. So my former saboteurs would be like, I'm going to avoid that or whatever. But no, I have people to work with. I have things to do, things to create, and good things to help the community. I need to get this resolved and figured out right away. Yeah. So instead of, creating a whole drama and telling all my friends and spending hours about that, which I've done before, I just called up a place and I said, here's what's going on. Here's the screenshots. Where do we go from here? Yeah. So it's a different way of approaching a problem. I'm not saying I've done that all the time, but it is kind of like how do you get more peace with your problem or chaos? Yeah.
And actually, I think, again, I'm interested to walk through it because it sounds to me like a lot of it's maybe just taking a beat before the action, but then getting into action, right?
Yeah.
But I mean, I think a lot of times we just go action to action to action to action, right?
Yes. Well, that's our response because it's our fear that's driving that, or whatever you find out the saboteur is. It could be you're hypervigilant, you could be a people pleaser, you could be an avoider, all these different ways that you learned along the way. So you're really undoing things that you grew up and that you learned. To be in a life of ease and flow is what he says, ease and flow, instead approaching it differently.
I feel like we've just scratched the surface on so many things that we could talk about. So we'll have to have you back for another episode.
Oh, I love that.
But I've loved our conversation. I can see the impact that just in your demeanor, I can see the impact that you make for your clients and the organizations that you've helped. Tell us a little bit about what you've got going on right now. Tell us about the podcast, where we can find you, and maybe any upcoming events you have.
Well, I have a podcast, and it's called the Joy Chemistry Podcast. And so that's a lot about living life well in any way you're a leader. So some of it has practical tools. Some of it, I'm starting to have guests, so I'm excited about that. So you can find me at docmaria.com, and that's the best way to find me. And you can click through there, connect with me, and so we could have a conversation. And then upcoming events. This is kind of far off, but we're going to have a wellness conference in October, and it'll be in Bolingbrook.
Okay.
So that's a future event, and then I'll probably be doing some webinar on I Am Remarkable, and so that's a volunteer initiative I had that originated from Google about self-promotion and how you take a look and really claim who you are.
Love that. Well, so go to docmaria.com, check out what Dr. Maria has going on all this year. Get in touch with her about positive intelligence.
Yes.
To download the app and go through the program yourself. I will give an update on how I found that. And just want to say thank you again for being here.
Chris, thank you for having me. I've loved this conversation. And yes, we have so much more, but thank you so much.
Absolutely. Well, hey, thanks again for joining us on Naperville Real Talk. We've got, like I said, a great season coming up. For those of you who have missed the podcast, we're back, I promise. And you can always check us out on YouTube, on Spotify, wherever you get good podcasts. And we will see you around town.